This is a true story from the early 1930s about an American boy named Hartley de Gerald who traveled the world alone. Hartley was from Chicago, where his father, a Polish immigrant named John de Gerald, was the vice president of the People's Stockyards State Bank. John de Gerald wasn't like a lot of parents today. He was the opposite of a helicopter parent, hovering protectively over his children. He wanted his son Hartley to be independent. So starting when Hartley was just 6 years old, John encouraged him to take trips into the city, then out into the country, to venture out on his own and explore. These adventures got Hartley hooked on traveling. He started reading all kinds of travel books and adventure stories. His favorite was Robinson Crusoe. He read the story over and over and kept telling his dad how he'd like to visit Robinson Crusoe's island, which back then was widely thought to have been the island of Tobago. So one day, in the spring of 1930, John de Gerald came home with a ticket. He had booked Hartley passage on a ship sailing down through the Caribbean, all the way to British Guiana on the coast of South America, and passing close by Tobago. Hartley took that trip in the summer of 1930, all by himself. He was just 11 years old. "I was scared when they put me on the train for New York," he would say a couple years later, looking back on his first big adventure. "But I tried not to show it to my family. They all came down to see me off, but I don't think they knew how I felt. New York seemed a lot bigger than Chicago. I don't like New York. It all seemed so crowded and pushed together. I don't like civilized places." Hartley traveled by train from Chicago to New York City and boarded the Western Ocean Steamship Company's ship, the Madison, bound for British Guiana by way of Barbados, Martinique, Trinidad, and a whole slew of other islands, a total of 16 Caribbean ports altogether. Here he is on board the ship with the captain. The ship passed close by Tobago on the outward voyage and again on the return, so Hartley was able to see what he thought was Robinson Crusoe's island twice. Here he is when he got back home with a pet monkey he bought in Trinidad for his sister. And here he is being welcomed home by his mother, Agnes. "I was worried some," Agnes said. "It seemed kind of a risky thing to do, to let a boy that age go so far alone. But I know now that Hartley can take care of himself wherever he is. One reason is because he can size up people so well." For his next trip, Hartley planned an even bigger adventure, a more difficult journey that would challenge him more. He would travel, all by himself, to the Arctic. Here he is, 12 years old, hugging his little sister goodbye prior to setting out from Chicago on July 11th, 1931. He traveled first by train, heading northwest into Canada, passing through Saskatoon and Edmonton, then north to a tiny outpost called Waterways on the Athabasca River. Today, it's the city of Fort McMurray. This was the northernmost limit of the North American railway system, the furthest north you could travel by train. From Waterways, Hartley continued north in a series of steamers carrying supplies to outposts further north. He traveled up the Athabasca River to Lake Athabasca, then up the Slave River to Great Slave Lake, then up the Mackenzie River to the remote outpost of Aklavik on the Arctic Ocean. And then, to cap off his adventure, who did he run into there but the famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh, who had flown nonstop from New York to Paris just 4 years before. Lindbergh and his wife Anne, who was his co-pilot, had stopped in Aklavik on their pioneering flight across the Pacific Ocean to chart a possible trans-Pacific route for Pan American Airways. Hartley got to meet them and shake their hands, and watched as their plane took off, bound for Alaska and then on to Japan. After that, he began his long journey home. Here he is back in Chicago with his dad, John de Gerald, his younger brother Lloyd, and his sister Annabelle, telling them all about the trip. Hartley took his next big journey the following year, in the summer of 1932, when he was 13 years old. He headed west this time, by train to Vancouver, British Columbia, and took passage from Victoria on a ship called the Niagara, bound for Australia, traveling third class. But he didn't go all the way to Australia. He got off at the South Pacific island of Fiji. For the next month, Hartley traveled all around the island chain, exploring and trying out his new movie camera. Then he caught the Niagara on its return voyage and sailed back to Victoria and caught the train home. In speaking with reporters as he passed through Vancouver, Hartley announced that he was already planning a new adventure for 1933, a trip to Africa, to the Belgian Congo. Hartley would never make that trip. Just days after setting out on his Fiji adventure, the bank where his father worked was closed, one of the many banks to go bankrupt during the Great Depression. The de Gerald family fell on hard times after that. And then Hartley's father abandoned the family. John de Gerald disappeared and was never seen again. This final blow changed Hartley's life completely. He had to drop out of school and get a job to support his family. Instead of going to university and becoming an anthropologist, as he had planned, he would go on to become a truck driver, hauling furniture all around the USA. He eventually settled in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, where he died in 2001. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like these kind of history videos, please subscribe to my channel.